And I want to give a special shout out to Ralph Anthony Garcia of the United Ronin Networks at YouTube. Make sure y'all go to the United Ronin Networks at YouTube. Check out his channel. Check out his series, Ralph Reads. Give it a like. Subscribe to his channel. And check out what he got to offer. Some really good stuff up there. This is Mike Mountain, and this message is approved by me. Peace.
What up, world? Welcome to Ralph Reads, brought to you by TURN, the United Ronin Networks. My name is Ralph Anthony Garcia, also known as R4. The legal, the loyal, the regal, the royal, Ronin Ralph. Your master of ceremonies. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Tell a friend to tune in to TURN, the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. On this edition of Ralph Reads, we begin a miniseries entitled RALPHIE'S Kids by RasheenJBrown. This miniseries is dedicated to young men of yesteryear who are now grown men over here. Let the reading commence. Following the light. Growing up in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, I lived at 270 Rochester Avenue between Eastern Parkway and Lincoln Place. The 80s was a different time to grow up as a young black youth. Seeing people doing drugs or fighting, breaking out, the violence was at an all-time high. Everyone was trying to find their way or make a name for themselves. Seeing the neighborhood drug dealer come through with his fancy gold jewelry and nice cars, or the stick-up kids flashing cash or any stolen items they just boosted off someone, seemed to be idolized among the young black or Latino kids in the neighborhood. The guys that I looked up to be a group that stayed posted on St. John's Place and Utica Avenue, the forefront of the infamous RALPHIE'S kids, who would later change their name and form a collective bond with another group who hailed out of Brownsville, Marcus Garvey Village. The impact they had on urban culture is priceless, and in 30-plus years, their name still rings bells across the globe. Taking the fashion world by storm and taking what they wanted just to fit in with what the world was at the time speaks volumes. Attending public school during their reign, it was two ways to get to school. Either walk towards Eastern Parkway, where I attended PS 167, or I could go towards St. John's Place, where you would see these young teenagers wrapped in the finest fashions and dipped from head to toe in every name brand that was popular at the time, but mostly in their uniform of choice, Polo by Ralph Lauren. Wishing that I could be part of the team, but due to my household rules and regulations, that was just a fantasy. And maybe for a good reason, because a lot of guys running rampant during this time either got locked up or became deceased. May they rest in peace. The streets do not love anyone, and many people found that to be true. 30 years later, I ran into one of the original members I looked up to when I was a young kid, and we had a brief conversation, which led to this book being read by you, and hopefully more to come. I want to thank Big Boo, aka The Watchtower, for giving me an opportunity to shine my light. 2 L's. Gang warfare and the rise of the drug game. During the 80s, the crack epidemic hit the neighboring communities of New York at an alarming rate, which caused many low-income households to suddenly fall apart. Many single-parent mothers had to raise their children without the help of a father in the house. Drugs were taking over, and crime was on the rise. Coping with harsh living conditions, the ghetto became survival of the fittest for most. Young African-American males, as well as young Latinos living throughout the city, were enticed by the wicked deception of having finer things by indulging in the rat race of getting ahead with the rare notion of selling drugs. Many lives were lost in the process. Jail or death was the result for most when it came to the destruction of many families living in the hood. Many adolescent teens were intrigued by the amount of money they could acquire by selling drugs, not knowing the damage it was causing around them. Choices are made and results come later. There are consequences in every act that an individual takes in life, whether good or bad. Fast cash, nice cars, beautiful women, and nice clothes were the main wants of a young kid growing up in the hood back in the day. To come from a broken home and seeing drugs demolish a family unit, or being on welfare and seeing your parents struggle could turn a kid to want to dabble in the streets. Many youths took everyday chances with their freedom by engaging in criminal activity day in and day out. If you were not drug dealing, you probably were robbing just to get by during this time-changing era. Everybody was trying to get paid no matter what the results were, and the outcome was drastic. Being born in poverty-stricken environments with no hope of a better life seems to always have a hard effect on those residents that reside in these hopeless habitats. What other options do the youth or adults have if there are no resources to help their situations? Who is looking out for us? When there are no answers, you must go find it yourself by any means necessary. What has always made New York so unique is the 5 boroughs that make up this beautiful place. Many people have come from around the world just to get a taste of the Big Apple, as most refer to it. Every borough is special in its own distinctive way. I honestly believe each borough has its own story to tell, and many great things as well as hardships have been encountered throughout the course of time in these passing years. Let me take you on a journey of how Ralphie's Kids came to life, as well as the low-life movement coming into formation, and how it is still going strong after 32 years. When listening to The Bridge Is Over, the chorus explains it all.
Brooklyn keeps on taking it. Brooklyn keeps on taking it. Brooklyn keeps on taking it. Taking it. Taking it. Taking it.
No disrespect to any of the boroughs in this classic rap song, but what always stood out was the Brooklyn line explaining the way many people felt about the residents of this borough. St. John's Place, better known as SJP, sitting in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, was where one half of the notorious shoplifting crews emerged from. A group of young males intrigued by the expensive fashion of the 80s, seemingly knowing that the high-end attire wasn't able to be purchased, decided the best way to get it was to run into different clothing establishments and ransack whatever could be obtained in the process. Some of the major clothing brands were Ralph Lauren's Polo, Guess, Nautica, Benetton, Fila, and Adidas, to name a few that were on the agenda to rock while roaming through the concrete jungle during this time. There was nothing that compared being around your peers, dressed from head to toe in the finest garments, knowing and feeling like you were important in that stance. Not being able to afford the expensive clothing made the treacherous crew desire it even more. Even if you were lucky to get away with shoplifting the goods and making it back to your stomping grounds, you still had to worry about rivals, your own crew members, and stick-up kids. Many youths were losing their lives over clothing, but the rush was addictive and everyone wanted in. The uniform of choice became the infamous Ralph Lauren's polo collection that this Brooklyn crew began to gravitate to the most. What became a sense of identity for most soon became a lifestyle to others. Dressing the part was key. A kid could be draped in polo and be broke to his name, but his confidence would be on cloud nine due to the appearance that was being showcased among his counterparts. It was all about how much you could acquire, and these missions, or Mia, as most lowlives will refer to, it became an obsession. What distinctive piece could be taken on these dangerous runs? What stores had the exclusive clothing that other crew members were not aware of, and how would it be possible to get hands on these special pieces? The main goal was to get as much as you can and make a name for yourself, as well as not get caught in the process. What became just a sense of wanting to be fly or fresh in the hood also turned into selling the clothing for a profit. It became an everyday hustle. The second half of the Low-Life's crew resided in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn, better known as Marcus Garvey Village to be exact. Crew that frequented that area around that time were also known as USA, formerly known as United Shoplifters Association. The two crews formed due to the respect of how each crew handled their everyday operation, taking on the risks of looking good as well as making a dollar in return. The affiliation became a drug for most. There was nothing to not wanting to get into the polo craze back then. Some crew members held down jobs as well and decided to not risk their freedom for these colorful but electrifying pieces of clothing that was taking over the minds of the ghetto youth. Ralph Lauren, born Ralph Lifshitz, decided to change his name, I guess in order to be more appealing to the masses that he would soon try to target with his first line of accessories, which was a line of ties. Turned down and not giving up his American dream, Ralph decided to go for it and later formed the polo brand that continues to thrive to this very day. The brand itself became entwined with the representation of being associated with a sense of royalty and significance, and many lowlives wanted a part of this involvement. The clothing was vibrant and fresh. New pieces were being developed every season, and as fast as they were being issued in the clothing stores, the shoplifters were taking them off the racks and headed out the doors. Polo was becoming the youth's new identity, and there was no stopping it. While people on the outside looking in may look at the boosters or shoplifters as mere criminals, there were young youths trying to be connected to the upper class that were able to afford these brands and feel as if they were somebody rather than what their living situations consumed them to be. It is difficult to know that your parents cannot afford a nice shirt or pair of pants, and the only way to obtain something you want is to go and steal it. These were the chances that were being taken every day. Some crew members were going out of town just to get items that were not being seen on an everyday basis. Some crew members sported the same attire that could be annoying knowing you don't have a leg up on the competition. That is exactly what it became, a competition on who had the rarest pieces, more or less a sport to many. Lowlives became as well known as the drug dealers in the hood. They even supplied the dope boys with the clothing that they stole from these high-end establishments. Everyone wants to look nice, and by looking nice, a price must be issued. The drug dealers were making so much money, they didn't have time to go running into these stores, so they waited until the stolen merchandise came back to them, and that's when numbers were talked amongst the buyer and the seller. The saying that the low-life stood by was money, hoes, and clothes, and they kept this true to their heart. Even though Ralph Lauren seemingly made the clothing line for a different demographic during the time it has surfaced during the 80s, the preppy, sophisticated look that was in line with success and wealth, the ghetto youth took it and put their own spin on the outlook of many. That is where the moniker of Ralphie's Kids emerged, looking like you were related to the man himself who created this masterpiece of art clothing. It seems as if gang culture has been relevant throughout the course of time when talking about the destruction of neighboring communities in the Brooklyn area. The main names that arise when the conversation is spoken are, of course, the Bloods and the Crips. There is power in numbers, and many individuals join gangs to be part of a family, or even protection from the predators of the streets. During the years of 1978, going into 1989, Ed Koch tried to take control of the alarming violence and chaos that plagued the gritty New York streets. Police were in full force, arrests skyrocketing. Growing up in an urban environment, there are slim options on getting ahead, and in the 80s, the situations were harsh. As a young child, imagine your father not being in the house, or better yet, both parents not present, and you being placed with a family member, or even worse, foster care. This was the norm for most of us growing up in the crack era. To obtain anything in life, you must give up something in return. This statement holds true to this very day. Single mothers were awarded government assistance in return only to agree to keep the black man out of the household. Without structure, many mothers had no help in raising their sons and daughters, which made certain situations worse than they already seemed to be. Being a black male during this transitional era was difficult. No man wants to feel like they cannot provide for themselves as well as their own family. When the man is not around, considered the head of household, everything seems to crumble. Young black children growing up in the hood who are fatherless gravitate to the older individuals who are getting the money. No one wants to see their mother or guardian struggle to put food on the table. When crack came out of the blue, it seemed as if the option of getting by in the hood was answered. There have been numerous stories on how crack cocaine came into these struggling communities and gradually destroyed many households as well as lives. The drug itself was just a means to ease the everyday problems that urban residents had to encounter on a day-to-day basis. The word was that the effect that this powerful drug had on the mind, body, and soul was an out-of-world experience. Either you became a user or a dealer, and the way that the money was rolling in, it seems as if everybody was signing up to get a fix. Many crews were being formed, and Brooklyn was turning into a battlefield since most crews were in search of power and control of the drug game. There were so many crews running wild during this turbulent time, and the party had just got started. One notorious crew that became legendary was the Shower Posse, a Jamaican-based organization out of Kingston, Jamaica, who migrated to the States and set up shop in the borough of Brooklyn at the height of the booming crack widespread. The story behind the definition of the Shower Posse was that when they went to war with a rival, the onslaught of bullets dished out to their victims were like a showering of sorts. Their killings were very treacherous, and they demanded respect at any cost. They were heavy into guns and drug smuggling and providing the entire Brooklyn region with their services. They were responsible for thousands of murders in the United States alone. Their operations spanned from Jamaica to Canada, British Columbia, Quebec, New Jersey, Miami, Florida, Pennsylvania, and of course New York. It was said that one of the founding leaders, who was apprehended in 1989, agreed to testify against his own gang as well as himself, stating that the CIA was the reason that he was involved with the formation of being a drug dealer and flooding the U.S. with this captivating drug that brought in millions of dollars. In every hood, you have young children who face many poverty-stricken situations, not by choice, but rather by being born in this hostile environment. Choices are later decided by these youths to survive. Mainly bad decisions are made because no one really takes the time to instruct these children of the consequences of their actions if they commit to their wrongdoings. There are problems that plague every urban community throughout the United States, as well as abroad, and the people who control the power know how to control the people. The government officials who run for office use tactics to gain popularity amongst the people, to gain votes, as well as to divide and conquer in order to benefit themselves, not really caring about who gets hurt in the process. The birth of the Shower Posse began in the year of 1986, when two rival communities, Arnett Gardens and Trenchtown, were both equipped with firepower to protect as well as take out voters to gain power and global dominance. The JLP, the Jamaica Labour Party, and the PNP, People's National Party, were the two major political parties vying for the control of Jamaica, and the battle was very intense as well as deadly. Providing residents with guns and ammunition to kill and destroy is not helpful at all, but when you are living in poverty and promised the world, the choices are slim to none. The political masterminds behind the destruction were Michael Manley, PNP, and Edward Seaga, JLP, who used Jamaican gangsters to help control the mind of the residents with fear and intimidation with their vicious attacks on anyone who got in the way. A whole community got divided for political gain. The purpose was for these people that actually grew up together and probably were like family members was to fight and kill in order for politicians to gain control of them, not knowing that their lives will be damaged. The political parties were more like an organized gang, and everyone was signing up to join whatever party seemed to be more sufficient to their wants. Some felt as if their party was in office, that there would be more access to jobs, more money, more opportunities, and the leader of these political parties were promising the people what they wanted in return for their votes and affiliation. The violence was so intense during this election that members of the Shower Posse, who were affiliated with Edward Seaga, ambushed and shot fellow native and famed legendary reggae superstar Bob Marley. It seemed as if nobody was safe during this dramatic change of events. Almost 900 people were killed in Jamaica that year alone. Once elected and in office, some officials have bigger tasks and problems to handle, but they also knew that they cannot lose focus on the ones that got them in position. A feared and ruthless enforcer by the name of Jim Brown was given an opportunity to run freely from Jamaica to the United States, distributing drugs along the way. Jim Brown, also known as Lester Coke, was a notorious drug dealer and henchman with political ties and the backing of his political partner, Edward Seaga, financing his drug operation. Coke had no worries at all. The United States became a place of opportunity for most Jamaican youths, seeing the widespread use of money being made by the drug business that was being set up in a new foreign land. Jamaican gangs were setting up shop and benefiting the most with their daily operations. The street value was close, if not almost $1 billion business, but it also came at a cost. Rumor had it that two different Jamaican gangs cannot coexist in the same area and that they will kill each other off to gain control of that territory if necessary. The most brutal encounter came between the Rankers and the Gully Man posse, which happened in Brooklyn right off Sterling Place and Schenectady Avenue, right in the heart of Crown Heights. The Shower Posse had a stronghold on the drug business, and New York was feeling the pressure at the height of it all. The leaders of the Shower Posse did not trust the Americans, so they would recruit Jamaican youths to the States. Having no other good options overseas, many youths felt as if this would be the better choice. The Shower Posse grew in numbers as well as the death rate for the opposing gangs that stood in the way. The residents who continued to reside in Jamaica were being well taken care of due to the U.S. currency that was being sent back home by the drug dealers who continued to cause havoc on the U.S. soil. In 1985, Edward Siaga decided to raise the price of gas to $11 a gallon, and the residents began to riot. Jamaica once again became a war zone for the people, and the army trying to combat the violence and pain that would soon take over the beautiful island. The poor people were being sucked dry, and they had nothing else to give to the political tyrant and his party. When you have no other resources, I guess the best thing to do is to fight back and hope everything falls in your favor. And that is what the residents decided to do. The Shower Posse had taken over 21 states, and the feds as well as local police decided enough was enough, and they launched a takedown of this violent group who not only supplied drugs, but were into kidnapping, robbery, money laundering, assaults, domestic and international gun trafficking, and fraud. 200 arrests were made in the year of 1988 to stop the Shower Posse and their operations. In Brooklyn, the posse headquarters or trap house in which guns, drugs, and money was located happened to be in an apartment building listed at 1367 Sterling Place. The apartment building was referred to as the White House or the Killing House, in which gang members or the rivals of the posse were killed or beaten. Drugs were sold out of this building, and the profits were very lucrative to the posse operation. The owners of this apartment building were believed to be killed by the very man that controlled the drug operation being run throughout the building itself. Real estate was being purchased, with the money being profited due to the illegal activity that was spewing throughout the various communities in which the posse continued to operate out of. More or less used as a front to look like a legitimate business, but in hindsight, still a very dangerous and turbulent operation that at any cost would be protected by violence. Each of the houses that were being bought were considered like a stash house where the abundance of drug shipments were being placed so that the operation could continue to be flooded through the streets, and not just New York, but wherever the posse had set up shop. As a youth growing up in Brooklyn, many Saturdays consisted of waking up early, grabbing a bowl of cereal, and heading to the nearest television to watch the best cartoons possible. Later, many children would go outside and imitate what was seen and acted out with their peers. One of the famous and iconic cartoons at the time were the Transformers, which consisted of robots trying to save Earth, and in the process, the Autobots or the good robots battling it out with the villains, who happened to be the Decepticons. 3 childhood friends that resided in Brooklyn during the late 80s decided to form a bond of brotherhood in lieu of all the craziness that was plaguing the New York streets, as well as the crews that were forming throughout the school system during this era. Everyone was trying to gain a rep, and it mostly came with a cost that would be vicious to those that could not stand their ground. The brotherhood would eventually grow into a gang that would be feared by many due to their vicious and malicious acts on rivals as well as innocent civilians that came in contact with them. The Decepticons' founding members, Cyclonus and Rumble, who attended Bushwick High School, while the other member, Megatron, attended Brooklyn Technical High School. The initial plan was to form a group of individuals with the same mindset to protect each other from being bullied by others that preyed on the weak. In a short period of time, the numbers grew throughout most of the boroughs in New York. Brooklyn being the home base soon spread like wildfire amongst different sections such as Clinton Hill, Flatbush, East Flatbush, Bed-Stuy, East New York, Brownsville, Harlem up in Manhattan, and Queens. The DSAP's reign of terror lasted from the late 80s well into the early 90s, and even though they are not mentioned as much nowadays, their impact on New York will never be forgotten. Known for impulsive attacks and muggings, this form of violence causes fear into the hearts of those that were not affiliated with them. There were even female members that eventually would join the gang and go by the moniker of the Deceptionettes, in which they too were as ruthless as their male counterparts. The initiation process for the female members were to either get jumped in, meaning that they would have to fight off other members, or they would have to get sexed in. The females will have to sleep with the males of whatever legion or branch they were to be a part of. It's always strength in numbers, and the wolves always prey on the sheep. What turned from 3 young teenage boys trying to hold each other down but protecting each other turned into something that spiraled out of control and took over with no sense of direction. Many notable rappers have had promising rap careers after running with their Decepticon crews back in the days, and have also mentioned or shouted out their ties to this infamous crew. The older generation of the Decepticons were just trying to survive, but doing it in an unlawful way, robbing jewelry stores, clothing establishments, innocent people, anything to get ahead and gain a profit. When the younger generation came along, they had no structure and were more unorganized than they probably should have been. As crazy as it seems, the Decepticons were generally part of the New York gang culture that many to this very day know all about. Vigilante terror. Violence has always plagued the inner city, and during the 80s, the subway system seemed to be the main area where most crimes would occur. Young thugs, as they were being labeled, seemed to terrorize any patrons going to or from their well-known destinations across the boroughs of the Big Apple. On December 22, 1984, 4 African Americans were shot and wounded due to Bernard Gatz, a patron on the 2 train, feeling as if his life was in danger, took it upon himself to protect what was his on this given day. Being previously assaulted 3 years prior to the incident of mention, Gatz later applied for a permit to carry a concealed handgun. Even though owning or using a firearm is illegal in the state of New York, he still managed to take a trip to Florida where he purchased a .38 caliber revolver for his own safety. Gatz's daily routine of work was to transport electronic equipment and large sums of money from many different locations, and he wanted to be safe at all costs. While aboard on the 2 train, the Black Youths stated in the police report that they were headed to the city to rob an arcade at the time. Getting on at 14th Street, the Youths made up their minds that Gatz would be the intended mark, not knowing that they would end up the victims. While sharing signals to each other and ready to carry out their plan, the Youths approached Gatz. Filled with anxiety and fear, shots rang out and all youths were hit. One of the bullets severed one of the assailant's spinal cord. Rumor had it, Gatz walked over to the bleeding youth and fired another shot, stating, "You don't look too bad. Here's another one," and decided to shoot him again. Gatz stated that he felt as if one of the youths had a weapon and he had to think quickly. Caught off guard, passengers on the train decided to flee to the next car out of the reach of the chaos that happened to spin out of control in a matter of seconds. Being approached by the conductor of the train, assuming that Getz was a police officer, he was later informed that Getz was merely just a regular patron who thought he would become another robbery victim on New York City Transit. Scared and not knowing what else to do, impulse took over and Getz jumped on the tracks and ran through the tunnel to Chambers Street Station, where he exited to his freedom. He later went home and decided to rent a vehicle, only to drive to Vermont to escape all the craziness that would soon come his way. While on the run, Getz decided to get rid of the clothes as well as the weapon that was used during the failed robbery attempt on his life. On December 26, an anonymous call came into the New York Police City hotline with details matching the lone gunman who happened to be Getz. Not knowing that he was a wanted man, Getz returned back to the city only to gather some important items and this time headed to New Hampshire, only to go to their local police headquarters and then turned himself in, stating that he was the person of interest in the New York subway shooting. Getz felt as if the New York City justice system was lawless and his actions were looked upon as if he took matters into his own hands due to others labeling him confused and emotional. The reports were stating that he had become the city's very own vigilante. During his tape-recorded confession, Getz stated that his intentions, while being surrounded by the assailants, was to kill them, and he hoped that he had more bullets to shoot more into them. He was also quoted saying he wanted to gouge one of the guys' eyes out also. Getz was taken back to Manhattan on January 3rd, 1985, and arraigned on 4 charges of attempted murder. His bail was set at $50,000, where he refused any financial support from family or friends and later on posted his own bail with his own money. New York City became a divided playing field, mainly due to Getz being a Caucasian male who happened to take matters into his own hands and deliberately shoot 4 black males who he thought were going to harm him. Some New Yorkers believed Getz's story. Others felt as if race played a major role in the shooting. The black youths stated that their only intention was to panhandle and not rob Getz. They wanted money only to go to the arcade and have a great time. There was no mastermind plan of malice amongst them. After the shootings, Getz became a household name and he gained many supporters who felt as if he was a hero for standing up to his attackers. The Guardian Angels, as well as the Congress of Racial Equality, even supported Getz. Funds were collected toward his legal defense. The assailants that were shot did not get that same positive outlook from the community. They were just looked at as street animals that had finally got what was coming to them. Getz later admitted that fear and race was a major part in him pulling the trigger. Taking his case to trial, Getz was sentenced to 6 months in jail, a year of psychiatric therapy due to the trauma he faced in lieu of the shooting, 5 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and a $5,000 fine. Later, the conviction he received was overturned to 1 year in jail without probation due to many miscues in the case. Getz would eventually just serve 8 months. Obstacle race. Coming from neighborhoods such as Crown Heights, many of the youths gravitated to the harsh reality that no one cared more about them than themselves. Well, to a certain point. Being from broken homes where the father or mother may have not been present, some had to be raised by other relatives to survive during these hard times. When all you want is love and someone to acknowledge you as a person, who else can you turn to but your own peers who are facing the same troubles as you are? Ralphie's kids were true survivors of this game we call life, taking chances every day to be accepted like the privileged children beyond the concrete jungle who lived better due to their parents making sure of it. A group of street-witty teens taking on the moniker of Ralphie's Kids about boosting designer clothing and putting their own twist on how fashion should look like and just creating a craze that continues today. It became a sport for most, but later a way to provide for not just them, but their own family. Ralphie's Kids became the base or root of how the lowlife came into formation as well. Beginning in the heart of Crown Heights on the block of St. John's in Utica, a story like no other would soon become world-renowned among the masses. Wanting to live like the gangsters and dope dealers throughout the neighborhood, chances had to be taken with suicide missions, jeopardizing one's own freedom every time members of Ralphie's Kids ran up into a clothing establishment at any given moment. It was a plain mission, and once inside, every man was for themselves. If lucky to escape from the security guards or undercover detectives prowling in search of nabbing the infamous crew members, things could be very lucrative once back on the block. The slang term, "get gully," came from the Jamaican crew that was running the drug scene at the time, and some of the Ralphie's Kids saw the benefit of selling the stolen merchandise to them, not knowing these guys were something serious in the streets. There's nothing like looking good with the right garments, and just as bad as to young teens that were taking chances with their own freedom, the Gully Men posse were also taking chances with their freedom as well. The drug dealers during this time wanted to look good also, and they saw the neighborhood kids coming through with expensive clothes that to many knew was impossible to acquire if you were not making real money. Anything that could be attained on any given Mia's would be sold at a reasonable price. Leather coats, shirlings was the biggest things back then. Any name brand clothing that was in style during that time would be on the list to grab and brought back to the hood for profit. Dealing with the Gully Men posse was like a for sure payday if you had the merchandise that they were looking for. Money was flowing like water in the days of the drug craze that was literally ripping neighborhoods as well as families apart, and the Ralphie's Kids took full advantage of it. Survival is always the key, and to get what you want in life, you must go get it by any means necessary. By having such a great partnership with the Gully Men posse, it was pure excitement when Ralphie's Kids went on their mission, or Mia's, knowing that when they got back, the money would be waiting also. Even before going out, some crew members would yell, "Get Gully," 'cause they knew it would be a great day for them. The term gully had another special meaning throughout the hood in reference to staying or getting fly or looking good. Reputation has always been a major thing amongst blacks and Latinos. It is like a code for the streets to make a name for yourself no matter who gets hurt. If your name rings bells, then the power and respect comes next. Many crews were forming and coming together, causing havoc and making a name for themselves, and everybody seemed to be a target for opposing crews, catching those not down with them wherever they came in contact. Even if members of the Ralphie's Kids were able to escape the clutches of the security of the clothing stores they were running up in, they still had to deal with the likes of the Deceps or stick-up kids that lay lurking on the trains en route to freedom. It wasn't an easy task knowing harm was waiting on any given train ride back to your own stomping grounds. See, it was always others wanting to take what you had already risked your freedom by taking from somebody else. Some crew members inside of your circle would test your gangster as well to see where your heart is. It was a cutthroat game, and you had to be built for the bullshit that came hand in hand when you decided to get involved with illegal activity. Many crews roamed in packs, knowing that there is strength in numbers, and if you got caught up being solo, the chances of getting away is slim to none. Robbery was at an all-time high, and nobody was safe. Either you had to be with your crew and fight it out, or have a razor or pistol to combat the opposing crew in seek of causing bodily harm to you, as well as relieving you of your stolen goods or any other possessions you owned. Just like the teens that were shot by Gets, Ralphie's kids could have been harmed just as well. Many members have lost their lives to the cruelty of what this world brings. No guidance equals no direction, just an attitude of impulse and how to go out and survive at any cost. Being from a predominant black community and having no positive outlook on what is around the corner, many of the children at the time were making adult decisions and not knowing what the outcome would be for them. The teens that gets shot were from the borough of the Bronx, but the same outcome could have been for any black child during this life-changing event. One of the accused assailants that got shot was later paralyzed, trying to flee from being shot by Gets. The chances the youths were taking was extremely dangerous for them, but running off pure adrenaline and testosterone was a deadly combination. The first teacher that most children learn from are mostly their parents. But when dealing with the severity of growing up in a time when there are no chances given due to the color of your skin or the living conditions that you are faced with, you have to get what you are given and sometimes take more if the opportunity presented itself. Growing up poverty-stricken and feeling as if your back is against the wall, some children are forced to become adults at an early age, not even getting a chance to enjoy their own childhood. When dealing with peer pressure or even trying to fit in with the in crowd, the choices must be quick and swift, and the consequences come later. Before the wild and young even made their mark on these mean streets, there were crews paving the way for them as the young looked on, anticipating their own chance to get in on the scene. Brooklyn has always been unique, and before most gangs even formed, there was a particular gang labeled the Tomahawks. It originated in Brooklyn and even started other divisions throughout the tri-state area. They were considered the largest black gang in Brooklyn at one time or another, and just like the Crips and the Bloods fighting over turf or any other misunderstanding situations at the time, the Tomahawks would usually beef with the Jolly Stompers and whatever gangs that wanted to rumble. Most of those battles were vicious and deadly. We learned from them. The Education of Sonny Carson, a very popular cinematic black film that featured in the 70s, showcased the reality of how the leader of the Tomahawks, Champ, turned his life around and tried turning negative situations into something positive that could benefit him as well as those that ran with him. After the movie, Champ took some of the money proceeds and decided to open many businesses in his own neighborhood, even starting a construction company. A hood tale was that Champ would ride an actual horse that he owned through the Brooklyn projects like a real live cowboy. Champ was feared and respected at the same time. Just like the Tomahawks and their existence, some crews tend to fade, leaving their mark on the younger crowd, not knowing that a cycle remains, and the older dudes who happen to be the forefathers are mainly responsible for this. Without a strong base, anything is liable to break down, and most crews who continue to follow the illegal structure of the street are forced to either head to prison or end up dead. There was an old movie theater on Sutter Avenue that the Tomahawks would frequent daily and would usually get in for free since they would provide security for the theater. The Jolly Stompers would come through trying to take over or cause havoc at any given cost. A lot of brawls and violence occurred because these gangs, as well as others, were trying to stake claim on different neighborhoods in Brooklyn. The Jolly Stompers got their name by stomping out whoever got in their way. Hood Tale states that the legendary Mike Tyson, who hailed from Brownsville, was either a member or affiliated with the Jolly Stompers. By not having any education or no promise of any businesses in the community hiring these youths, it seemed that the only thing that they could get in was trouble or join a gang. Extortion was one of the major crimes that the gang members were involved in. Extorting and preying on the many merchants that were afraid of the backlash if they said no to the demands those members were seeking. Business owners were too afraid to testify or point the finger and were unwilling to talk to police. The gangs had too much control and power, and the rise of recruitment continued to soar through the roof as things in the different sections of Brooklyn got worse and worse. As the gang activity continued to rear its ugly head, a Hebrew organization by the name of B'nai Zaken thought it would be a great idea to unite all of the gangs and form a coalition labeled the Family, in which everyone could benefit, and not just the main two notorious gangs at the time, the Tomahawks and the Jolly Stompers. Crown Heights to Bed-Stuy all the way into East New York was controlled by gang activity, and the reach extended more by way of force. The infamous Empire Roller Drome, which most Brooklynites referred to as Empire Skating Rink, became a major hangout for most of the neighborhood kids. But in a short period of time, the gangs invaded this space as well, and all hell began to break out. The owner of the skating rink was a Caucasian businessman by the name of Hector Brumi, who refused to fall victim to the extortion demands that were handed out by the gangs trying to make a profit by any means. The gang members wanted to be business partners without an actual contract agreement, as they did not like to be denied by anyone. The Empire was grossing almost $100,000 a year, so imagine if your hand was in the pocket of most of the surrounding area businesses and they were pulling in major cash. Most of the chaos would happen on weekend nights when capacity was at an all-time high. It seemed as if large crowds brought more problems. The plan was to cause issues at the rink and have the owners select who they would bargain with for the security, since they could not rely on the police to keep them safe. By extorting the businesses, the proceeds were being exchanged for guns that happened to come from the Hebrew organization B'nai Zaken. They saw the benefit of having a partnership with the Tomahawks and the Jolly Stompers, the two most treacherous gangs to walk these Brooklyn streets, and they took full advantage of it. B'nai Zaken did not stop their partnership just with those two gangs. Their reach traveled the whole spectrum of Brooklyn and probably beyond. The leader of the Tomahawks decided to part ways with the B'nai Zaken organization, mainly due to the fact that he felt that they had a hold on the gangs, and they had total control of how these gangs operated, so they were heavily targeted by the police departments in the area where crime was being mostly done. One of the main temples that B'nai Zaken operated or held meetings were located at 237 Buffalo Avenue in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Brooklyn back in the days had always been divided due to certain crews claiming rights to their residing neighborhoods, and if you didn't live in a certain part of town, it was best that you didn't step foot unless you were ready to get it on. Even going to check a female, the first question you would ask was, "Where you live at?" Shit was always hectic, and you better be strapped. No dude wanted to see females in their neighborhood giving another dude play from outside their own hood. You could not even go play basketball or attend a house party in somebody else's hood without dealing with some kind of bullshit. Go play ball and win against the opposition and see what the outcome would be. Black-on-black violence was spreading like wildfire, and everyone wanted to catch a rep, meaning that by any means necessary, the aggressor was ready to make a name for himself at any cost. Nobody wants to be played or feel like a sucker, so they do what needs to be done. A lot of individuals are dead by choosing to not walk away or who got caught up in the wrong situation. Some have made the penitentiary a home away from their actual home and have embraced it with open arms. Growing up in Brooklyn, there were certain places that were off limits, especially for young black men. Imagine having to watch your own back in your own Brooklyn neighborhood, but also knowing that if you step foot somewhere else, would or could get you killed. One, two, and I mean 1, 2. There's a train passing by already. I wonder if this microphone is really picking it up. Or I could go towards St. John's Place, where you will see these young teenagers wrapped in their finest fashion. Damn it. Bro. Always something. Hurry up and fly your stupid ass over. Whatever you do, don't crash. Part of me might be wishing you to do so. I really don't mean it. I hope it doesn't happen for the sake of my karma, but can't help but to want to feel that way sometimes. Ralph Lauren, born Ralph Lifshitz, decided to change his name, I guess in order to be more appealing to the masses that he would soon try to target. Fucking bullshit. Damn it. And they kept this true to their heart. Go away. These goddamn uptown trains. At the time, the JLP. I'm so sick of these fucking trains. Once elected and in office, some officials have bigger tasks and problems to handle. Yo. What the hell am I even doing this right now, bro? All these trains passing by. Thank God I was in downtown train, so it wouldn't be so fucking annoying. One of the famous and iconic cartoons at the time were the Lord. Shut up. One of the famous and iconic cartoons at the time. Getting on at 14th Street, the youth made up their minds. Jesus F. Christ. The bums of anarchy are running wild again. His bail was set at $50,000, where he refused any financial support from family or friends. A hood tale was that Champ would ride an actual horse that he owned and ride through the Brooklyn projects.
Summary from Wikipedia. Tailwater refers to waters located immediately
Shut the fuck up, please. Shut the fuck up, please. Thank you. Thank you for fucking shutting the fuck up, fuckface. Wow, man. Shut the fuck up. Shut 2 fucks up. In fact, shut 3 fucks up. Hell. Bahalapantes, a magnetizing manly musk, hinted with a splash of lightly sweet floral scents that are native to North America. Perfectly engineered to turn heads and tickle her olfactory nerves. No poles are needed when fishing at the pub, but don't forget the bait. Bahalapantes. A 30-milliliter bottle gives you about 600 modded sprays of this new technology to convenience the alpha man in you. Bahalapantes. Get your bottle today. Bahalapantes.